The ancestors saw the eyes of the puppies when their father disappeared. It was fear. It was not longing. It was the body looking for a name for absence. Today you call love what is just unused abandonment. If they cling to relationships as if they were salvation, but inside they are just asking for lap. It is not a partnership. It is lack of romance fantasy. You are not in love. You are begging for validation. But no one will give you what your father denied, nor is that their function. Real love does not come to complete whole. Come to overflow what is already entirely. You are ready to stop begging for affection and start building presence? There is a truth that dwells in the depths of our psyche as a fossilized bone. Much of what we call love is just disguised absence. When we observe the traces of our Neanderthal ancestors, we find small skulls embraced to the largest, a scene that has been repeated for millennia. The puppy seeking protection, heat, presence. This same primitive instinct of bond, which one day meant survival in the cold caves, today manifests itself distorted in our modern relationships. What you call passion can actually be the echo of a scream never heard. That feeling of emptiness in the chest when someone does not respond to their messages. That desperate urgency to be with each other. That feeling that without this person you simply do not exist. All this carries the emotional signature of the abandoned puppy. It is not metaphor, it is origin. It is the emotional genetic code that we inherited from a time when being alone meant certain death. The child you were still lives inside the adult you became, and she keeps looking for that look that never came, that lap that was always busy, that word of approval that echoed only in silence. When you fall in love, it's not just you who falls in love. It's also that 3-year-old who still expects someone to get her on her lap and say she's enough, that she is loved by the simple fact that she exists. The Neanderthals painted the cave walls with their hands, leaving marks that said, "I was here." Today you leave your digital marks on social networking profiles, seeking validation, looking for someone who confirms your existence. Technology has changed, but the primitive need remains intact. You are not looking for love. You are looking for a mother, a father, a presence that heals the absence that has settled in you even before you learn to speak. Observe your relational patterns with the cross of an emotional archaeologist. That tendency to idealize who is distant and devalue who is close. That compulsive need to know where the other is and with whom. That feeling that you only exist when you are being looked at. All this are fragments of an ancestral trauma that perpetuates from generation to generation. The abandoned puppy that exists in you cannot distinguish between adult love and childhood necessity. He just knows that being alone hurts and will do anything to avoid this pain. Contemporary society romanticizes this lack, transforming emotional dependence into proof of true love. They say that those who love suffer, that jealousy is proof of passion, that not being able to live without each other is beautiful. But there is an abyssal difference between loving someone and need someone to exist. A difference between choosing to be with someone and can't be with yourself. When you understand that most of your loving desires are emotional repetitions of unresolved needs, you begin to question whether what you call love is not in fact a desperate attempt to heal wounds that only you can heal. The Neanderthal who dwells in you still believes he needs a tribe to survive. But you, a modern human being, have the ability to become his own source of security and self-esteem. This recognition journey is not comfortable. It is like finding that the house where you always lived was built on fragile foundations. But just looking at these foundations with brutal honesty, you can begin to rebuild your ability to love maturely, free from the invisible currents that keep you prisoner of repetitive and destructive patterns. Modern culture has created one of the greatest psychological traps in human history, the belief that seeking someone is synonymous with emotional maturity. We are bombarded with narratives that glorify incompleteness as something romantic, as if we were orange halves designed to find our other half to finally become whole. This is a dangerous illusion that keeps millions of people stuck in cycles of emotional dependence disguised as true love. Carl Jung, in his observations on the human psyche, identified that much of what we project in the other are unintegrated aspects of ourselves. When you feel irresistibly attracted to someone, it is often not the real person that you are falling in love, but the unconscious representation of something you believe you need to complete. It is as if you look at each other and see not who he is, but who you would like to be, or what you believe is missing. Our Neanderthal ancestors lived in small groups where each member had a specific function for collective survival. The connection between them was functional, based on real needs for protection, hunting, and reproduction. Today we maintain this ancestral programming, but applied in a distorted way. We look for in the partner not only company, but existential validation, purpose of life, cure for old trauma, and solution for voids that we could not even name. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby, reveals how the relational patterns we develop in early childhood become the mold for all future relationships. If you have inconsistent caregivers, you can become anxiously attached, always fearing abandonment. If your caregivers were emotionally unavailable, you can develop an avoidance style, maintaining emotional distance to protect yourself from rejection. They alternated between availability and abandonment. You can develop a disorganized pattern, oscillating between extremes of necessity and rejection. What few realize is that these patterns are not love. They are strategies of emotional survival that disguise it with love. When you can't be alone without feeling anxious, when you constantly need a partner's reschedule, when your mood depends on your attention, you are not loving. You are repeating childhood learned patterns to deal with the fear of abandonment. Society reinforces this confusion by celebrating codependent relationships as examples of deep love. Movies, songs, and books romanticize obsession, jealousy, and emotional fusion as signs of true passion. But note the difference. Maduro love freely chooses to be with each other, while the lack of disguised love cannot choose to be without the other. Jung also talked about the process of individuation, the path to which a person becomes psychologically independent and complete. This process requires you to stop seeking abroad what can only be developed internally. It means recognizing that your emotional needs are your responsibility, not your partner. It means learning to be your own source of security, validation, and love. When you understand that much of your relationships were born from the unconscious attempt to fill old holes, you start to question, I'm choosing this person because I genuinely love you and I want to share my life with them, or because I believe it can heal something in me that I can't heal alone? The answer to this question may be uncomfortable, but it is essential to breaking the cycle of grace-based relationships. Like those Neanderthals who have learned to fire so as not to depend only on the warmth of others, you can learn to generate your own internal emotional heat. This does not mean becoming a cold or isolated person, but someone who loves from abundance, not scarcity. Someone who chooses to be with each other not because he needs it, but because he wants to. This is the difference between loving and needing, between partnership and dependence, between emotional maturity and lack of disguise of love. Imagine this scene. You are in a seemingly mature relationship with adult responsibilities, intellectual conversations, and future plans. But then your partner takes time to answer a message, or casually mentions an ex, or simply seems away for a few hours. Suddenly, that functional adult you believe to be disappears, and in its place comes a wounded, desperate child who interprets any sign of removal as imminent abandonment. This transformation is not character failure. It is the result of unintegrated trauma that continue to operate in the shadows of your psyche. Like the Neanderthals who carried primitive tools even when they were not hunting, you carry within themselves the defense mechanisms you developed in childhood, ready to be activated to the slightest sign of emotional danger. The inner child who has never been truly heard cannot distinguish between the present and the past when he feels threatened. For her, that sense of rejection at 5 when it was ignored by parents is exactly the same as you feel when the partner is only tired after a difficult day. The body does not know the difference, fires the same hormones as stress, activates the same warning mechanisms, generates the same reactions of struggle or escape. Note how this manifests itself in jealousy. You know rationally that your partner can have friends. You can find other people attractive. You can have a life regardless of yours. But when he laughs at another joke, when he shows interest in a conversation that does not include you, when it simply exists without your constant presence, something primitive is active. It is not the jealousy of the present. It is terror of ancestral abandonment. It's the child you are shouting, "Don't leave me alone again." Emotional dependence works similarly. You can have a successful career, friends, hobbies, a seemingly independent life. But when it comes to the love relationship, your self-esteem floats like a buoy in the sea, completely depending on the waves of attention and validation of the other. You can't feel good about yourself if you don't have the partner's constant approval. It is as if you were two people, the competent adult who faces the world, and the needy child who only feels safe when he is being loved. The fear of abandonment disguises it on many sophisticated forms. It can appear as perfectionism. You need to be the perfect partner not to be left. You can manifest as control. You need to know where the other is all the time to feel safe. It may arise as self-sacrifice. You nullify your own needs so as not to risk disturbing and being rejected. Here is the question that cuts like a blade through all these masks. Do you want a partner or an emotional caregiver? This distinction is fundamental because it reveals the difference between adult relationship and transferred parental relationship. When you seek in your partner someone who calms your anxieties, who validates your existence, who is responsible for your happiness and emotional security, you are not looking for an equal. You are looking for the father or mother who could not give what you needed as a child. The Neanderthals who survived were those who learned when it was safe to trust the group and when they needed to count on themselves. They developed the ability to discern between real threats and false alarms. You need to develop this same emotional wisdom. You need to learn to distinguish between adult intuition and child trauma reacting. This does not mean that you should become a cold or suspicious person. It means recognizing when their reactions are proportional to the present situation and when they are disproportionate responses based on old wounds. It means creating a space between the trigger and the reaction, where you can ask, is this real, or is my past trying to protect me from a danger that no longer exists? The integration of these traumas does not happen overnight. It is a process that requires compassion for yourself, patience with your healing pace, and especially the courage to look at the injured child inside you with the eyes of the love adult you can become. Only then can you start loving with all your being, not just the fractured parts that still cry out. In the caves where our Neanderthal ancestors recorded their first artistic expressions, there is an image that is repeated. Smaller figures always positioned close to the largest, such as seeking approval or protection. Even after 40,000 years, this dynamic continues to operate in your psyche. You are still positioned as that smaller figure, hoping that the larger figure, symbolized now by the father, the partner, the authority, finally recognize its value. The father you seek in each new passion is not necessarily your biological father. It is an archetypal representation that inhabits the collective unconscious, the provider, the protector, the one who should have said you are enough, but remained silent. This silence echoes through generations as an emotional ghost, and you spend your life trying to fill it with words of love that never come. Note how this operates in your relationships. When you are attracted to someone emotionally unavailable, it's not masochism, it's familiarity. Your nervous system recognizes the pattern. Ah, this distance I know. This indifference reminds me of home. You feel safe in insecurity because that's what you know. Inconsistent love seems more real than stable love because it replicates the original dynamic where you had to fight to get attention crumbs. The absent paternal figure, either by physical abandonment, emotional coldness, or simply for the inability to be truly present, creates a specific void in the psyche. It is not just a lack of love, but the lack of mirroring. The father should reflect back his strength, his ability, his inherent dignity. When this mirror is blurry or absent, you spend your life looking for reflexes in other mirrors, trying to find out who you are through the look of the other. Carl Jung has identified that what is not consciously integrated will be compulsively repeated. The unresolved relationship with the father figure becomes a pattern that you recreate infinitely, hoping that this time the end is different. You choose partners that replicate the same dynamic, emotionally unavailable, critical, distant, or simply unable to see who you really are, and then struggles to conquer their love in the same way that fought to conquer paternal approval. This creates a sophisticated psychological trap. When someone genuinely available approaches, offering consistent and present love, your internal system shoots alarms. This is too easy, you must have something wrong. You sabotage healthy relationships because they do not activate the family neural circuits of the fight for approval. It's like you've been trained to climb emotional mountains, and when someone offers flat ground, you don't know how to walk. Idealization works as anesthesia for this pain. When you put your partner in a pedestal, when you see it as perfect and unreachable, you recreate the original dynamic where the father was a heroic and distant figure. You prefer to love someone impossible to face the possibility of being truly seen and yet rejected. It is safer to love a projection than risking loving a real person. Neanderthals left fossilized footprints that show that they walked in groups, but there were always isolated footprints, individuals who walked away from the group to explore unknown territories. These lonely footprints represent the moment someone chooses to separate from the collective standard to discover their own way. You need to create your own footprints, get away from the repetitive pattern of searching the other, the approval that only you can give yourself. To love someone without healing this primary relationship with the father figure is to perpetuate the prison. It is turning each relationship into an attempt of psychotherapy, where you unconsciously tries to heal through your partner what can only be cured through your own internal work. It is to use love as a medicine instead of living it as a natural expression of a being who already feels complete. True emotional maturity begins when you stop looking for parents in partners and begins to relate to real people, failures and virtues, without the need for them to fill the holes left by their family history. This requires that you become your own symbolic father, the one who offers himself the approval, security and unconditional love you have always sought abroad. There is a moment on the human journey that marks the definitive transition between emotional childhood and authentic maturity. This is when you stop looking out seeking salvation and begins to excavate within yourself the source of love that has always been there, only buried by conditioning layers and unique wounds. Since the Neanderthals, who have discovered fire not to depend forever on embers found in nature, but to create their own light and heat, you can learn to generate your own emotional stability. Self-awareness is the first fire you need to light up in the dark caves of your psyche. This means observing his relational patterns with the curiosity of a scientist and the compassion of a loving father. When you can see your defense mechanisms, your projections and your needs not met without judgment, something magical happens. They lose the power to control it unconsciously. You become the observer of your own internal dramas rather than just their compulsive actor. Reconnecting with your own value is how to rediscover a lost civilization within you. Below all the voices that told you that you were not enough, below all the experiences that made you believe that you needed to strive to deserve love, there is a fundamental truth. You were born worthy. Your dignity is not something you achieve through performances or achievements. It is inherent in your existence. Neanderthals needed not proving that they deserved to take up space on the earth. They simply existed and claimed their place in the world. True emotional maturity is a rite of passage that our society has forgotten to teach. It is not something that automatically happens with age or the accumulation of experiences. It is a conscious choice to stop outsourcing your emotional stability to others and take full responsibility for your inner world. This means learning to calm down when anxious, to be validated when insecure, to accompany when lonely. It means becoming your own primary source of security and love. Imagine yourself coming out of a cave where you lived all your life, believing that darkness was all that existed. When your eyes fit the sunlight, you realize that the world is infinitely larger and more beautiful than you imagined. Getting out of the repetitive patterns of seeking in the other what only you can build is exactly this release experience. You find that you no longer need to bend love. You can offer you freely from the internal abundance. Ancestral fire that burns within you is not just survival, it is creation. When you stop using your vital energy to fill emotional voids and start using it to express who you really are, your life becomes a desperate search into a generous offering. You no longer come into relationships because you need someone to complete yourself. You enter because there is something genuine to share. This symbolic birth happens when you finally accept that no one else can do for you the job of loving yourself. No partner, however dedicated, can heal their childhood wounds. No relationship, no matter how perfect it may, can fill the void that only you can fill. It is a birth because you literally become a new person, someone who loves from fullness, not lack. When you reach this state, something extraordinary happens in your relationships. You stop attracting people who complement your neuroses and begin to attract people who resonate with their authenticity. You stop trying to change the other to fit your needs and start enjoying each other just as it is. You stop using love as a survival strategy and begin to live it as a natural expression of a being who already feels whole. Here is your silent vote of liberation. I choose to stop seeking in others what I can build in myself. I choose to become my own source of security, validation, and love. I choose to love not because I need it, but I can. I choose relationships that celebrate who I am, not try to heal who I went. I choose to be free. Like those first humans who have left the sand for thousands of years, you are leaving your own footprints on a journey that is only yours. Every step you take toward emotional maturity is a step that no one else can take for you. And every relationship you build from this solid base is a testimony that it is possible to love without getting lost, surrendering without canceling, being vulnerable without being dependent. This is the true revolution of love, when it is no longer a need and becomes a choice, when it is no longer survival and becomes celebration.